right, well, welcome everyone to meeting number 9. So we're almost to double digits, and that's where we're going to end. We don't want to go much further than that, but thanks for sticking with us and continuing to come out. Got a lot to be able to cover tonight. Some of it is answering some questions that came up last time, some good questions about Fund 80 and the use of facilities in Fund 80, and then continue our conversations about the outdoor competitive athletic fields and some opportunities, some design work that we'll take a look at. So a lot to get to. So with that, I'll just go ahead and get started. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. One of the things, the recap of meeting 8. So specifically around some of the feedback and other topics related to Fund 80. So there's a question that came up last time around Fund 80, which is just to define Fund 80. So that's our community recreation fund. So as we have different buckets that we can spend money out of, that's accounted for. Fund 10, so there's a little bit of school lingo, so I apologize, but Fund 10 is our general fund. So as we're paying for teachers and classroom resources and that type of thing. Fund 80 is allocated specifically for community recreational programming. And so there's specific definitions around what you can use Fund 80 for. So it's accounted for a little bit different in the fact that Fund 80 is outside our revenue limit, and our general fund, Fund 10, has a revenue limit that's decided at the state level. So Fund 80 does not have that revenue limit, but has some specific details around community use and accessibility to community use that needs to be that money needs to be spent on. So, for example, as we would look at our athletic programs, if it's a in-season team, for example, we can't build a gym out in the middle of a cornfield and say it's Fund 80 because it's way out there, and have our in-season teams go out and play out there like that and not have it be accessible to everybody else. Versus some of what we've been talking about is taking a look at like our indoor practice facilities or indoor recreation facilities that we can open up to the entire community and provide that accessibility for programming, whether it's seniors or whether it's our students that are out of season or anything really that would be community accessible. That would be something that we could use Fund 80 to be able to manage, and staff and programming that we'd be able to use Fund 80 to manage. So there was some questions about that last time, so I just wanted to kind of come back to that, talk about the indoor facilities, and then see if there's any other questions on that. So let me just, we had some conversations about how to paint the picture of what acceptable use of Fund 80 would be. And so what that would look like, and as we're thinking about our indoor practice facility or indoor recreation facility, that would need to be accessible to the community at all times. So as we would look at that facility, we'd need to make sure that that's accessible. We'd have a lot of space in that facility potentially, as some of the designs would show. Now, some of that time, we've also talked about our in-season teams having the availability to come and use those facilities. And we would need to be able to do that, but do that on a temporary basis. So in talking to the athletic directors, and I can have them speak a little bit too, we've talked about just having, especially during kind of the fall and the spring times, where sometimes you have inclement weather and your teams can't practice, that we would have spots of time that would be reserved on a temporary basis for those teams to be able to, if it's raining outside, for those teams to be able to go and use those spaces. Now, that doesn't mean that the entire facility is closed down to the community, because we're going to have a lot of room in those spaces. And so we still could have programming going on outside of that temporary use, but we would have some of our in-season teams being able to use that space. We'd also have a lot of our student athletes who are out of seasons, who are not in season, be able to use the space. And that's more in a recreational context, so that's more of kind of what Fund 80 would follow. But there was some questions about, our teams being able to use these facilities, and if it's Fund 80, can they not use those facilities? So there's some flexibility, again, as long as the accessibility to those facilities is open to the community. So questions on that?
I just have one quick question.
Yeah.
Is Fund 80, is that something that every school district has access to, or is it different because we have a rec department?
Yeah, so it's rec department, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why ours would be big, and that's what cable's budget is around Fund 80.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and that's money that we, that we collect through tax collections, but that fund is, again, separate from our general fund,
Yep.
which has the revenue limit on it.
Okay.
So,
All districts do have access to it, but the ones that like don't have a rec department might use it for school resource officers or something like that. I know that's how Menasha used it.
Okay.
They didn't have a rec department, that was through the city, not through
Right.
the district, so but our rec department gives us a much broader
Yeah.
service to the community that we use that for.
Okay.
much
okay.
more robust, and they're
Very much
bringing in
so.
a lot more revenue, right?
Yep.
Right, because you have that programming, so they operate in that,
Okay.
in that regard, so. So, any other questions about Fund 80? I don't know if Brad and Craig, if that covered it in cable, if you guys have anything else to add?
I think when Craig and I met and talked about it, what in a perfect world for the schools is we would create a schedule that we would send to the rec department and say, these are the times our kids need it. And then we would know that we could get in and use it. And like Mr. Davis said, it would fluctuate depending on certain times of the year, with probably the spring being our #1 priority with the way Mother Nature's been in the last couple of years.
Yep.
And, and then in the off-season, it might be open gyms, it might be some other activities that are run by non-school groups that our kids would be involved with. So
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Craig, with that.
No, just think of this last spring for sure. We would have been in there all of March and pretty much all of April, right after school, just because it was so horrible.
So we'd have the opportunity of those teams to come in, but again, the key is that it's not exclusive to just those teams. Those facilities will be large enough where we'd still be able to do some other rec programming in that space, and just schedule around that just for those temporary, for that temporary time. So that's basically how we would run that. So again, before moving forward, I wanted to make sure we kind of came back to that, so. Yep.
I see that the term majority is specified there. Is there a hard number? Like, is there a way someone's gonna come back and say, no, you actually exceeded the use?
No, not really.
Yeah, no, and it really just looks at that accessibility. So what the red flag is that we can't shut that entire complex down for the spring because we just don't know when it's gonna rain, and nobody else can do anything in there. Type of thing. So it really is, again, the idea is the community fund, and for our purposes, we'd have that open all day. So we're going to be, I would anticipate scheduling in there, from morning to night. So this will be actually a pretty small sliver of the amount of time that facility would be used. As we go forward.
Yeah, I would just add to that, with the anticipated use of court time with pickleball, we could have, that program throughout the day, volleyball. With a turf field, we could do a variety of different kid programs, open gyms for kids all throughout the day while it's not being used. Evening time, obviously, if we had courts, we could have that available for the community or for the public use for basketball, volleyball practices, things of that nature. So I anticipate a lot of use throughout the day and into the evenings.
And one of the things that Cable's working through, and that will, if this facility develops, that we'll be really conscious of, is making sure that we're complementary to the YMCA programming and the senior center programming, right? Like, we don't want to cut each other's legs out from under us. We want to be able to build those opportunities. Our facility would be unique for what we could offer compared to what the Y would offer, compared to what the senior center could offer. So we'd make sure that we're, again, working collectively as a community to make sure, we can expand the opportunities and needs for people, and be able to attract people from other places. So. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to Clint, and we'll get back to the competition stage and facility spaces.
All right. So as we have been tracking, again, our feedback, what you'll see here, as well as we tried to pull some of the key parts for this to develop that recommendation. So we're going to go through, again, the finalization of the outdoor stuff, and then we're going to kind of go through the recommendation piece. We're carrying all these comments through to the recommendation piece as well. I think a lot of our feedback last time kind of centered around the topic Brian just kind of went over in regards to kind of who and how and why the facilities get used, and getting some clarification on that. So again, kind of from our prioritization, again, our schools need to come first, the turf needs at the schools, and so on and so forth. So again, good feedback from last time. So again, I pulled out all of our precedent study this time, so kind of just highlighting again what we're looking for. As we met back with the team earlier this week, we kind of talked about some of the needs and reframed a few things. So again, we think from the district perspective, and this being a shared use facility, building a combined stadium, again, for seating for 4,000 at one location for the use of both high schools, best suits the needs of the district. 2 baseball fields, and then actually looking at 4 softball fields, so a little bit of a change there. We have a little bit more information on, again, what the recommendation is as far as track needs, and then again, all of our support functions to serve this facility. So in terms of the track, what we again kind of heard from the district and from the team is really kind of we'll call it kind of a 4-track scenario. So utilizing the high schools currently as the competition venue for high school. And then creating a north side at the Val Phillips site, and then utilizing Traeger for a west side facility. So again, there'd be basically 2 high school facilities and 2 middle school facilities with the flexibility that they can be utilized, by one or the other based on competitions or so forth. So what that kind of helps us do is it does kind of pull the need for the track then to follow as part of this outdoor venue along with that. So as we look to update then our solution, again, as we looked, kind of starting with the soccer, football, future lacrosse, other field sport needs, if the plan would be to do turf at this location, and then have turf at both of the high school facilities, the need for additional fields here would be reduced, because again, the turf would be able to be utilized full-time or anytime, as well as the facilities at each of the current high schools. So if we were able to maybe get a bigger size site, an additional practice field could be something that would be prioritized in that consideration. But again, kind of core needs, the group kind of felt that this best characterized that. So again, our 4,000 seat auditorium stadium here, competition and practice venue, a quad softball facility, which would serve both well in terms of the district's need for softball, as well as a venue for tournaments on weekends and during the summer. And then 2 baseball stadiums. There's the term pony on here, and that just simply means the ability to adapt the field based on, at the lower level baseball, the base distances are a little less, the pitching distances are a little less. Similarly, on the softball level, my daughter, who starts her first year of softball tonight, the bases are in, the pitching's way in. The other thing we talked a little bit about last time was the introduction of that miracle field conversation here as well, so showing that as a possibility here as well. Again, I'm sure we'll continue to have a lot of discussion about parking. Again, I think as a starting point, as we looked at all of our examples, all of our precedent examples, again, somewhere in that, say, 8 to 1,000 range in terms of parking. I'm showing 880 in this particular case. Again, if we get a bigger size site, maybe we can do more parking or prioritize parking over and above. But again, as we were looking at some of our precedents, really none of them eclipsed that size of a parking facility. So again, using that sort of as our starting point, when we look at site, I will show, I think, to add, to get up to what we would be required, again, looking at the ordinances of one spot per every 3 occupants. I'll show, I think we need to add 7 to 9 acres more to add that additional parking. So it's quite a bit of land that we need to go above and beyond. ADs, any comments kind of on the overall site organization and kind of concept here that I didn't touch on?
I think you hit it pretty good. In regards to the tracks, we just felt, instead of putting a track around here, UWO's track will be fixed. I know they've been telling us that for probably 6 to 8 years, but next year, supposedly the spring, that they're gonna dive in and do it. And that would still be used as our showcase track when we're hosting a big time event, a conference, a regional, a sectional. And so to have a track, access to a track at 2 of the 3 middle schools in the future, we're gonna affect so many more kids putting tracks at the 2 middle schools. And then that alleviates the high school tracks as well, so.
Just from the baseball, softball perspective, you know, to run quality events, you need at least 4 softball fields, not only for high school events, but Little League. And then the idea of at least 2 pony compatible fields. My son is at the pony age, and right now the only field in town that's usable is Mary Jewel, and it's not in very great shape. But, you know, if an OIB or a Northside Feeder or some other organization wanted to run a tournament for that age, there are very few venues that I know of anywhere in the area, maybe even the state, that have the ability to have multiple pony fields. And those fields will be interchangeable. Turf fields where you could set them up for regulation, you know, softball or pony baseball, which the difference is anywhere between 60 feet for softball or Little League to 70 or 80 for pony, depending on what your pony definition is. So this would make the facility very attractive for community use outside of the traditional high school season as well.
Sorry, I have a silly question.
Yeah.
Where would people sit to watch these games?
There'll be bleachers, kind of this little bleachers behind the backstops.
Okay, it's the same.
Same thing here. Yeah, this kind of U-shaped or C-shaped box is meant to indicate bleachers.
Is that enough for something so big like this?
Yeah, I think our thought was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the baseball fields we'd set up for about 400. Maybe decide on the other one how big it would be. And then similarly, we'd have a bigger one. So again, I think we have room here to adjust if need be. But there's quite a bit of space.
It just looks so too big, so, thanks.
Any other questions? Yes.
What's the size of the soccer/football field slated to be?
We have the soccer field, the soccer field is able to go wider than a traditional football field, so I forget the length or width, but we're able to go to the wider width, and then it's just same length as a football field, so 360, sorry.
Okay.
So this is a handicap accessible facility, so it would be kind of like that rubber surface that you see sometimes on playgrounds. It's a little bit squishy, but it's you can see it's roughly about the size of an infield. So it's a opportunity for handicap individuals or people with disabilities to have access to a playing field and participate in the sport. And then the model that we're basing this off of, is it Memorial Park up in Appleton? So they also have a handicap accessible playground that's kind of adjoining it as well.
On that same vein, able-bodied players but handicapped parents, so would they have access to?
Yeah, we would have sidewalks and so forth from parking to get down to those locations. It's always the double-edged sword of this configuration, we want that to be inward facing, so there's a little more travel to get there, but I have seen fields where they all orient the same direction. There is, some people believe there is one direction. It depends, I think, if you're a pitcher, catcher, first baseman, third baseman, which one you want the sun in your eyes. But there is kind of a general rule of thumb, and I mean, you do see some where they're all oriented the same direction, but then again, that hub in the middle is lost, and some of the efficiencies of how that works is lost. And again, this is a fictitious, perfectly rectangular site that fits everything in there perfectly. So depending on what the size of the site or the configuration of the site, things might need to get twisted and turned and reconfigured. So going into cost estimates, we did update this a bit, again, based on some of the jostling of the added fields or subtracting the fields. Again, we're right around the $21 to $22 million range for this facility. Again, kind of all in with aspects of that. Again, we did not include any purchasing of land in this cost, so that would be the piece that's missing in this particular case. Just for the sake of kind of taking a look and seeing, if that size property was not available, and maybe we could get something at another size and sort of split these two features up. So kind of one as a competition venue. Again, roughly 16 to 18 acres of just that, the stadium and parking associated with that. And then likewise, 25 to 27-ish acres for just the baseball, softball side of things, looking at that. So again, I think ideally this would be a singular facility, but again, with the availability of land, if that's not possible, this might be a couple other ways to potentially look at things. Any questions about that? So again, let's take a few minutes here, just talking through again the concept here. We would kind of again, are we identifying the needs and the goals for this facility, and any other items that we should think about or consider as we're again looking to kind of button this one up. Again, after that, we'll jump into the site, and then we'll go into that kind of recommendation piece. So comments, thoughts, again, just starting kind of with the overall concept or plan here.
The one thing I noticed was that when you split out the soccer football stadium, you went with a much greater number of parking spaces.
I think it's 880 and 885. Yeah, I think this is 850 and it's 880 in the other one.
Oh, yeah, but.
Yeah, when we add them up, when they're together, we're making the assumption there would never be a competition football game the same day as a competition baseball, so there's some economy of scales that we're sort of working under in that regard. So yes, there is some benefit to them being together. All right. This group? Or do you want to, should I come back to you?
The only thing we agreed on is it would be better if everything was together as opposed to others.
And we're planning real estate agent.
Yeah, we are.
All right. Brian said we gotta do that tonight, so we're finally taking that.
At some point we do.
Yes.
I never played it.
All right, our group over here.
We like it. We really like yeah, we agree. I'm pretty sure that would be great if we could put it all together, but if we can't, we can't. That's just the way it goes. We don't know, this particular piece is for how many years out now? Where is this?
Well, again, I don't know that we're saying definitively. I think we've always kind of talked, this is sort of floating between 2 and 3 somewhere. with again, our Bill Gates or
Bill Gates,
whoever's
yeah.
gonna come forward to kind of help spur this on, so
So it isn't coming tomorrow.
it's not, I don't think so.
6 to 10 years-ish.
Okay, so we have no idea really what's going to be available in that time, and we just need to keep, as part of this plan, somebody needs to keep monitoring what's, if some factory closes, kind of thing. So, that's about all. Did we say anything else?
Yeah, coincidentally, I had a realtor just text me out of the blue today, asking me if I'm looking to sell my house, and I'm not, because I don't want to have to try to find something. So yes, you never know when that,
Whoever
that
thought.
magical text comes forward to the district, so.
Anybody?
I think it makes sense, the consolidated site plan, the Miracle Field, the pony bases, and the setups for flexibility makes sense. It's just logistics, really, what it comes down to, but makes sense.
All right, so let's talk a little bit again about site. So I think at somebody's request, we did print the maps out for you guys tonight. So hopefully they came out pretty good. Again, I think we've talked about some of those parts and pieces. Again, this is kind of the assumptions that we're trying to make in terms of kind of what we think for parking. So again, if we kind of roughly say about 400 occupants total for the stadium, about 400 for baseball, about 400 for softball. We need roughly 1,600 parking spaces, so that's almost double what we currently show here. I'm showing again about 38 to 40 acres of land for this with about 880 spaces. And to add basically, close to doubling our parking, we need about another 8 acres of land. So we're almost approaching, close to 50 acres, 45 to 50 acres of land needed. So again, the question always kind of is, I keep using the analogy, but do we build this to be a Walmart where it's, I don't know, 4 or 5 events a year where it would be full? Do we take advantage of our neighbors potentially, again, wherever this might be located, that if there's parking in the area, that helps to offset that. But again, trying to kind of give us a general sense or idea of what we need overall for land.
In your experience, is that one spot for 3 occupants sufficient? Or do you see sites where that's become an issue?
Well, again, as we looked at all of those various examples, I don't believe there was a single one that would have satisfied that. Maybe, gosh, I think if I remember right, I didn't have them now. I want to say like West Bend, I think, had almost 1,000 parking spots, and I forget how the size of their stadium was. But I would say it's probably atypical that 1 to 3 for this type of, it would be pretty tough to satisfy. So again, I think working with the city, looking at what opportunities exist, so that again, we're not putting devoting so much land to basically asphalt that's just going to sit there and not have cars parked on it most of the time.
Does it have to be asphalt parking, or can you have some outlying stone parking somewhere?
That's a possibility. I mean, kind of like Titan Stadium, I think they utilize some grass area there.
Yeah.
So I suppose that would be a possibility. Or like Country, whatever, Rock USA or whatever that is, they park people on grass. So that could be a possibility as well. Again, it's just the problem there, one rainstorm and it just turns into an absolute mess.
Yeah.
Which seemed like every year at Country USA.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, like.
What's going on?
48.
Yeah, 40. So as we looked or talked about a little bit about site selection, we sort of simplified our options here. There truly probably are limited in-town location options, but again, keeping that opportunity open, and then out-of-town locations, so sort of framing things into those types of buckets as we look at this. And I guess for a facility of this sort, again, the specific, I'll say, to the shared use between the two schools, again, I think in an ideal scenario, it would be magically right between the two high schools and serve the needs there. But the reality, again, of finding that much land is likely slim and none. And the reality is maybe some of the other facilities are better suited to be in that kind of prime location, if that would magically come to bear as an opportunity. Now, Brian, any additional thoughts on this perspective in terms of kind of just the simplification of, in town versus out of town?
No, other than, I think as much as we can, it might not be as applicable to the competition stadium just because of the size of acreage that we need. But, I think as much as we can, being able to get some in-town locations, again, getting the more people we can get to Oshkosh, to see Oshkosh, I think the better. Get them to our businesses, get them to our hotels, get them to gas stations, that type of thing. But I think the reality when you're looking at, the size of acreage, when you're talking, 38, 40, 50 acres, then that becomes pretty limited currently. That might be something, again, that changes as we move forward.
Well, on the edge of town, in 10 years could be not so much on the edge of town, some of these streets, so I think you gotta load farm fields or things that are out there now, immediately west or southwest or the north.
Can I ask a really stupid question? And it is stupid, okay? But would there be a possibility, there's a neighboring school district that's really, really close to ours, right, on road. Is there a possibility to build something towards the west side, maybe, I don't know, because there seems to be land there, and share it with another school district that's much smaller, that probably wouldn't have a lot of demand on that?
Yeah, it's a possibility, yes. It's more, I would say, this might be more appropriate for like sharing with Lourdes, somebody that would be in town.
Gotcha.
Typically, just my family being from Amro, like we want to play at Drodnik Field. That's walks right out of the high school onto their field, right at the school. But yeah, I could make a phone call really quickly. But keep, those types of opportunities open. Yeah, I would think of it a little bit more of just who can we collaborate with in town?
Yeah, no,
As we go.
What's the acreage of the Riff Road site?
39.
Yeah, 39. That's a 30. Yeah, something like that. Dave, Riff Road is 38, 39.
Yeah, I think 38.
38.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if, in my opinion, it would be a really hard sell for the community to go out and buy extra land to build something like that when we have school-owned land. So I think that's just a consideration.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and I know Riff Road wasn't historically popular for a potential school build, but does its purpose, does repurposing it matter? Does that become more tolerable? That might be a question.
Or we sell it. We own property on South Oakwood Road for many, many years where we were going to build an elementary school. Well, it wasn't large enough, so then we bought the Traeger, where Traeger is, and we sold, I think there's a church there now on South Oakwood Road.
Yes. Yeah, so land swap, if you will. Yeah, sell that and be able to look. So yeah, those are all.
Yeah. In terms of distance too, if we're thinking of what we call the festival ground, Riff Road is probably closer. I don't know. Or if we want to go to Country USA, then we might as well go to Riff Road. So it depends.
All right, so we'll break off here again. Let's have some, just a little bit of discussion in site. Again, I think kind of your recommendation for, as the district would look for sites, again, whether they're, I guess they're available today or the ones you would try to target in the future as we look to solve this challenge to build a great facility on a good site somewhere.
All we discussed was the fact that, you know, we're hoping that with this plan, and when people hear it, that maybe there's gonna be someone that then is going to step forward and say, hey, now that you have this plan, here's a donation of land, because we don't know, I mean, where you would go internally, in the city big enough, and even then, on the outskirts, we talked about town of Algoma, then you have to think about there's not necessarily right now city water there or hookup for sewer and all of that. You know, there's other issues then that open up. So in short of somebody coming and saying, yes, here's land that you can have, or us watching to see when something becomes available, we didn't have any answers.
Yeah, the land at Nina was given by a farmer west of Nina, yes, and they still farm part of it.
Well, we're landlocked. Oshkosh on the water is,
Well, okay, so an idea that had been popping in my head in and out is like people do build islands.
Build what? Oh.
China.
Well,
China,
in Tokyo, I mean, they needed land, well, they grew it into the bay, so.
Saudi Arabia, yeah,
Well, there's that one.
the home things, yeah.
I've had zanier ideas, so. Like the goats for mowing.
Well, it just seems, seems to us in this table that on the west side, the west side is probably where to go. West of Oakwood Road, out to a farm to start talking to farmers out there. I mean, I think doing something at Rift would be considered a long way to go. Even really north, and you gotta go across the bridge, and then you gotta go up, and then you gotta go back. Up on 45. Versus just going west of
look
town.
at where West High School is. It's 16. And you go, there's the bridge, you went, it's not that, however, I know parents don't want their children going over the bridge.
Or the bridge, yeah.
But,
So that was a big controversy when we closed the Sunset, and our kids have to go across the bridge in a school bus. We thought hell was gonna,
Jill. Yes, and the same was true when we talked about changing some of the boundaries.
Just so you're aware, your numbers on your map are different than ours, on ours.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry,
Yeah,
those
it's
are updated.
Washington
compared to
School
that one.
and
So
nobody
like
wants to
west
do-
on there is 17, and on ours it's 16, just so you're aware when we're talking numbers.
Thank you.
Oh, you're right. But nobody wants to do eminent domain.
No.
Is the bridge thing really that bad? Is it
But
slow?
you would not.
dozens
believe-
of buses go across
the
from other
bridge.
school
You live on the north
districts
side, people live on
going
the south,
across.
the west side people.
You would not believe.
It was then, but
it.
school buses go across there all the time.
You're talking about the Beatamore Bridge,
The
right?
Beatamore
Bridge,
Bridge,
you
yeah.
got it.
got more lanes now,
It's
and it
got more
didn't
lanes,
have it back then, so that might.
It was just,
Just from a Oshkosh community perspective, I think, from the bridge aspect, like, you go across the bridge, I think you're thinking Winter County and Nina when you go outside of that. Whereas if it's south and west, you're still kind of like, oh, I'm gonna come into Oshkosh and go to wherever, right? Like,
I mean, Nina would benefit greatly from Riff Road. I mean, if you talk about that Riff Road location and you talk about ease of hotel,
now you have a choice.
you're going to Nina.
Right?
Right.
I mean, you just
true.
are.
You go to Nina, that's absolutely right, you wouldn't go to Oshkosh.
I mean, you might, depending on whatever, but Nina would benefit greatly, which,
That's one of the goals. that-
Nobody wants that.
I mean, benefit from everything already.
if I were in your shoes, I would have send Drew out and start talking to farmers. Yeah, that's what I'd,
You wore a straw hat today.
yeah. I'm a farm boy, I'll go with you.
All right.
So the field across from Webster is what part of Menominee Park.
Mm-hmm.
What about leasing land from the city and, expanding their ball diamonds? And working out something with the city.
Well, that's an interesting, the geese, that's the only problem.
Well,
Fertilizer.
And lake flies.
Oh, I like flies.
Flooding, big time
Sure.
in that park.
It's true. You'd have to redo the whole geostructure, whatever that would be called.
but people play baseball down there.
Oh, sure. Lots of people, crazy people.
And the city is looking for other ways to expand those diamonds.
That would be lovely, it would be a lovely project, right? Mm-hmm. That's a
Red Arrow is troublesome because of the dump, I get it, but, that might be,
Not big enough for that area.
Supposedly that land is sinking.
Is sinking?
Yeah.
and they can't go
At
too,
Red
you
Arrow.
can't go too far down, I think, because then you'll hit the barrier, but I don't know. Probably anything could be fixed.
So, did you guys have anything more?
It's just a unique idea of, does anybody know what's gonna happen to the outlet mall? And if that's going downhill, maybe that would be a great site.
Yeah. I don't, but that's, put it down in the notes, these are all things that we'll explore all of it.
Well, the other one I wrote down, and now some people are doing some things, but like that area where the old Walmart now mine shaft is, sat empty for years. I know there's issues with the airport, so I don't know what you can actually build there, but I don't know how long that, that auto detailing shop is really.
Oh, where Woolman's is?
Yeah.
Oh, they
Rogus.
detail it.
Yeah.
Extreme Customs isn't
Extreme
going
Customs
anywhere,
is
they're
still-
there to stay.
There.
Okay, so they're not going anywhere.
I know they did a
Oh, no,
lot of
there's a
work to
huge
get that
business.
building,
Okay.
so.
And it's not big enough in that area. It's
They
just-
custom price trucks and stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a huge business.
From what I've understood with the FAA guidelines around there, it was pretty tumultuous for mine shafts and getting where they did, in addition to Extreme Customs.
Yeah. Like all the hotels have struggled, like they can't build up. Yeah.
What about the leftover golf land by Ushbush?
Maybe it's a whole lot size. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure.
just too small.
Yeah. it's-
The golf, we didn't talk about golf course. Shit about the golf course. Well,
Maybe,
not you.
maybe the city would look at repurposing Rainbow Park. That would get you right between west and north.
But it's not big enough.
No, and it's real long and
It's
narrow.
skinny, long and skinny, yeah. We'd have to buy houses.
I guess what I'm saying is, if you have an opportunity to
Yeah.
split baseball from the stadium because you have a good option,
Sure.
I'd go with the good option.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, sure, keep it together. But if you have a way to find a way to make it work, I get the one done, you could get done.
Sure.
Any other feedback from your table?
I think the only other thing we talked about was the, is there acreage by, was that Lakeside, the southeast? There's a field right next to it, I think somebody said was for sale, 40 acres.
Down by Lakeside Elementary.
Yeah.
Lakeside, 39 acres, the Secker property is for sale.
Secker.
I was gonna say. Like,
Who's?
The Secker
I don't know.
Trust,
What Secker?
the Secker Trust, all the Seckers, Guyan, Secker, Spar, Frank
What?
Seckers.
That's my family.
You
I
wanna
know,
use it?
but feels
I
for
don't think
sale.
there's any trust that I'm related to.
Wait a second.
I'm like, God damn, I might.
I'm on the zoning
He's gotta
board.
go.
I'll be right back.
Trust me, it's the Secker property, 39 acres for sale.
Is it
That must be
passive, or where
Diane
is it?
Spar.
You can see on the map over here pretty clearly.
It's right. There's Lakeside. It's that field right there,
Oh, reservoir, okay.
And then how many acres?
39 acres.
Oh,
She's texting. I'm texting my mom.
Are we rich?
Oh my God, Mom, are we rich? You never told me.
yeah, yeah.
Anything else from this table?
mean, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to make this thing as visible as possible and have it right off the highway. The festival park makes complete sense to me.
Or up
You have thousands of people driving down the highway, this big, beautiful stadium with baseball fields. Any investor's gonna want a return on their investment. They're not gonna get a return on investment unless you can hold baseball tournaments all year round, or at least for 9 months, 8 months. Soccer tournaments on the turf field. Most of these things, to my knowledge, are sponsor-driven as well. You're gonna have to find a number of sponsors to make it happen. Because baseball and football is hard to get a return on investment. Because you can't use it for 3 or 4 months.
I agree, that needs to be very, if we want to do more than just the school district, it needs to be very visible by thousands of people.
What about that farm on Jackson? Almost.
Yeah, we talked about that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Forgot the name of the farm.
I just had 2 quick things. One of them, I mean, we compete in the FEA, so we compete against Neenah, 3 Alfredson schools, Kimberly, Kaukauna. So the site off of Riff Road would literally be on the northern end of our border, which would provide easy access for nearly all of the other FBA schools. If it's a competition venue, and it's not like people are gonna walk outside the high school and go right there, people are gonna have to drive there no matter what, so having something that from a coaching standpoint, that doesn't seem like it's a bad location at all. And the other comment I'd say is there's a soccer complex right off of Highway 172 in Green Bay. It is deafening to try to coach there because the noise pollution from the interstate is so loud, you have to scream for anyone to hear you. So this is like right off Interstate 41. I can only imagine that coaches would be going hoarse trying to overpower the noise of the interstate.
Coach soccer those
Must have
fields.
figured it out. Concerns, but they might have been farther ahead.
All right. So, well, we're not quite at the end yet. So again, kind of part of tonight's exercise is now how do we kind of land the plane, so to speak, a little bit. So we have a kind of draft of what we think, we call it a recommendation. I don't know if that is the appropriate word. But the thought is to introduce this tonight, to give you guys roughly the next week to kind of look at it, think about, again, what our message is going to be, and then come back on the 23rd to really spend our time kind of dissecting and reformatting things. So let me bring my presentation here for 1 second. So again, just seeing it, I know you guys will want to dig into some of the details. So again, that was kind of the goal with getting this to you early and giving you till next week to kind of look through it. But if we want to quickly, I'll kind of go through just a quick introduction of it, kind of the approach of what we think this is. Again, thought we'd just start off with the quick. So the quick, is that it? Oh, okay, one more. So again, the process that led us to, prior to the 2.0, again, kind of reiterating what we were looking for, again, touching on those, the 4 projects that we were looking for. Again, creating purposeful spaces to inspire success and promote the many talents of the community. And a solution where possible to maximize uses, reuse, and or replacement of existing facilities. It's another one. So again, kind of our committee was made up of 2 different groups, you folks and then our subject matter experts. And then again, we met a whole bunch of times, so yes. So for each of these, and again, this is our first kind of draft at it, but we thought it would be helpful, again, as we've kind of been talking, and I think spurred a little bit from the last time, sort of asking these simple questions. I don't know if you reframe this and say this is our elevator pitch for each of these, but, and if this is insufficient in the questions we need to ask or have the answer for, that's, again, I think what we'll spend a little bit of time. But for each of these, what are we building? Why do we need it? Who is this for? How are we prioritizing this? And again, this was, again, the specifics here, but again, a little bit to today's earlier conversation, the district teams will be given first priority for scheduling, and facilities will be available to OASD teams from, I've made up these numbers, but from a set time daily for school, for practices and games. If built off-site, how will transportation, we talked about that a lot. Again, the idea that we'll explore some type of a shuttle system to offer transportation for events and practices. How will this be funded and timing? So again, kind of wording this that we need our magic donation to kind of initiate the process. And then the remaining funds would likely be probably a future referendum of some sort. Timing, it's anticipated this is probably somewhere between phases 2 and 3, which again, as Brian said, kind of that 6 to 10 year range. Talking about the rec department and their involvement, and then where should this be located. So again, this is just the questions for the outdoor competition facility we just talked about today. But again, for each of these, I think it's important we go through and sort of check these series of questions off. So there might be some we should resurrect kind of from the questions you guys have been asking, but we were hopeful kind of, again, kind of in terms of an elevator pitch or an overall concept of what we're trying to do for each of these, this would be a good start. Oops. Yep. And then the next piece then is to show our concept. So again, our overall concept we talked about tonight with our site size. Talking a little bit more about specifics with the sites, again, which we had that conversation tonight. Again, talking through what our requirements are, what we're providing, and if we were to provide additional, what that would entail. And then our costs. Yes?
So there's a discrepancy between that slide with the cost and the slide from today's packet.
Is there? Okay.
For the cost.
We'll yeah, we'll
Yeah,
update. Yep. This was the old one that I threw in here as a placeholder. Good eyes. They'll take this deal.
Yeah.
So again, then starting over, going through that same process, talking about the indoor competition and practice facility. Again, our bullet points within here. More or less, I think I'm asking, or I'm showing sort of the same general questions, because I think both facilities sort of have some of the same questions and comments. I would say the rec department piece is probably a little bit different in this one. I think we talked a little bit last time that the rec department's involvement in the outdoor might be undetermined initially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that facility and how you guys would utilize it, be a little bit more of a wait and see approach to how you guys would get involved there. This one, obviously the indoor, I think you guys would have a very active presence, of not even your offices in this location. So again, it would be, rec department would heavily play into this one. Again, our floor plans, our site considerations, and then our costs here. So I'm just going to pause. I can obviously kind of continue to go through, but in terms of kind of, again, kind of landing the plane or culling all of the information, does this seem like a good approach, or is this still too dense or too much information?
Well, it's good. We just have to add up the cost then to get the whole. Or not.
So maybe at the end we do kind of a, these are the.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, the aquatic center, Again, going through, I'm not gonna read through all of these, but again, our prioritization piece, travel, funding, rec department use.
I guess one comment I have is, we're reviewing, three athletic sites and one performing arts site. And I can't remember what the timeline is for building all of these, but don't forget about performing arts.
Yeah,
Not you.
Oh.
I'm saying just when
Should
we
we
go to.
put these in order as we showed them to you guys?
Yes.
Okay, because I,
Is there any way to put some of these together? I think that's one of the questions too. Because we're looking at recreating a lot of parking.
Yeah, so I think the important thing to remember, and I had a conversation with our board president about this, so we'll be providing recommendations on each one of these 4 areas. There is not a need, so in thinking about like the presentation, we're talking about prioritization. Like, is there a need to like create a final product or a priority, priorities within these projects? So the sense is that, no, that the recommendations don't need to be prioritized. What that allows for is kind of maximum flexibility for the board, because there's a lot of things that are gonna happen between now and 6 to 10 years from now. So I think the idea of stay flexible, look for combinations, what makes sense, I think that can be baked into the theme of the presentation. That'll ultimately be determined by the board on when it gets to be that time as we move forward. But I think it'll be important just to be able to provide details and recommendations within the buckets, and then be able to allow the board in the timing, because some of that also depends on, I think all of these lend themselves to some potential private-public partnership. So we don't know what that's going to be. So we wouldn't want to prioritize something and then say, well, actually, we've got money over here now. It just, we just want to be able to stay flexible.
I guess I was thinking more in terms of, how many people in the community have come to these facility meetings? So if I have 10 contacts, and those 10 have 10 more, and she has 10, we can be spokespeople for this way before it has to go to referendum. Or, I'm putting something on Facebook about, wow, what an awesome process with the facilities. I'm already planting the seed that, hey, we did our due diligence, the school district did its due diligence, we brought the subject matter. So the more I have simple talking points, not necessarily, this is a plan, but use us.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm referring to as
Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, it's helpful, and I think that'll be part of what we can talk about next week is, what does the presentation look like? And I think distilling it down to, some key talking points, elevator speech-ish, if you will, as much as you can, knowing that, there's meat on the bones here too, there's a lot to be able to look at, so I think you'd want to have both of those.
I think this shows true transparency, for those that didn't watch the tapings, that by having all that, I know it looks like a lot to be in there, but everything is transparent.
Good, great.
You pointed out that people will have to understand in terms of the fine and performing arts facility. Bill Phillips does not have an auditorium. Webster Stanley's auditorium is being torn down. There will be no auditorium over here on this side of town for any school performances.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely needs to be part of the presentation, right?
Yes.
In that section. Yeah, for sure. All right, so I think the idea is that, take a look over the next week, if you can take a look at this document, circle, scribble, draw arrows, thought bubbles, whatever you can have, so we can come together next week to really, put some fine tuning to the presentation for the board. What we're looking at for a presentation date would be July 13th, so it'd be a school board workshop. that would be the delivery of the recommendations. So July 13th, 6 o'clock at night. So we'll be looking for a couple representatives from the committee potentially to help present and go from there. So that would be the idea. So we want to be able to provide you with this information tonight so you can go through it. We can have a productive conversation next week to hopefully finalize that presentation or at least bring it to a good conclusion as we move forward. So there is one piece of information that I want to just give you a highlight on that relates to the land conversation. So we're kind of in the middle of it, but I just wanted to give you an idea because it may affect some of these projects. So at our last school board meeting, I brought to them a draft lease that's an agreement with UW Oshkosh for East Hall Park. So East Hall Park is positioned pretty well in between the two high schools, so we have a tentative agreement now with the university to have a long-term lease for East Hall Park. And essentially the terms of that lease are a 50-year lease for $1 a year that allows us to build a facility and manage a facility on that site. So that's something that has two 20-year renewals after the 50 years. So basically we'd have 90 years for $1 a year. I'm going to kick in for that, so don't worry about it.
And you are Warren Buffett?
Yeah, to that extent, that's about it. So the process, that's not completed yet, but I just want to put it on our radar. So our board reviewed that lease last week and is very supportive of it. So they'll take action next week at our board meeting. And then it needs to go for approval at the Board of Regents, because UW Oshkosh can't vote on that. Specifically, it's owned by the Board of Regents. So it's on the Board of Regents agenda on June 9th and June 10th they meet. So it's on the agenda. So I've been working with the Chancellor on that. He's very optimistic that if we pass it at the local level, that it will pass with the Board of Regents.
Is that next to Merrill?
Close, yeah. Jackson in New York, yeah. So
What's your initial thought on what would go there then?
So, well, it's 8 acres. So as we're thinking of, what's that?
8.8.
8.8, okay, almost 9 acres. Yeah, so when I look at its location and look at what we have been talking about at that size, my head goes to the indoor practice, indoor recreational facilities. I love the accessibility that you can provide for all kids. You can run public transportation there from anywhere in the city. You can run shuttles back and forth from both high schools or middle schools. I love the fact that as you'd be bringing tournaments in, you'd be bringing them all the way down there. If I'm getting in there, I'm not getting out without spending a lot of money with Amy and everybody at the Visitors Convention.
And my family,
And maybe through the Second Trust. But I really like that as a potential. Now, there's a lot of things that would need to happen with that, yeah. So that's just something that's kind of late.
There's no parking there, right?
Breaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think parking's going to be, unless we, are out in a farm field, parking's going to be an issue. That's kind of an Oshkosh issue, but I think there's things that we can navigate around. It's close to the Belle Phillips School, so we'd have a parking lot at the school to be able to work around. It's limited parking on that site, so we'd have to get a variance for that. And probably, one of our thoughts is to be able to put also a playground for kids on that site also, because that's just part of that neighborhood. I think that would be a nice touch. So
you're talking about this indoor multi-purpose facility?
Yes. Yeah. So again, so that's not official yet, but wanted to put it on the radar as a possibility again as we're trying to play realtor on something that recently came. So, all right. Anything else for the good of the cause tonight? So again, homework is really just to go through the recommendation. There's things on there that you want to make sure are emphasized, and we'll refine that presentation as we get to next week, and then ask for volunteers for July 13th as people are around.
I got your Kringles.
16?
All right. Anybody order Kringles? All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great night.